Hi, everybody. Welcome back to another edition of VCTV. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott, and we are here to speak today about everything health, all the way from bio to med to general health tech and even telemedicine, as we look at how each of these four industries, and really all looking at health, how health and health technology has progressed, not just in 2020, but looking at the decade ahead. Where are things going? What are some of the latest advancements in technologies in these industries that we haven't been talking about that we need to be aware of? At the same time, where is our new technologies such as blockchain, quantum computing, and others that we've been speaking about recently here on VCTV intersecting to push these industries forward? That's what we're here to talk about. And we've brought some of the best and the brightest from around the world who specialize in these areas that we're going to be speaking about today and have a ton to share globally about what's happening in these industries. But before we start, a big thank you to you, our audience, for tuning in. If you're liking what you hear today, click that big subscribe button down there to tune in all day, every day on VCTV, as we have guests from around the world that join us to speak about different technologies, industries, and regions around the world and how they are progressing. So you get the latest information as an investor on where to place your bets, and as entrepreneurs, what you need to know as to where to begin building or where to begin pivoting. So ton of information every day here on VCTV. Definitely tune in. And if you'd like to be on a show like today, reach out to the team and or myself, and we'd love to find the right fit for you. Entrepreneurs, that also goes for you. There's a virtual stage for you here at VCTV to pitch us as investors and founders focused very much on your industry to get real-time feedback on your company, product, or service. If you would like to do that, do reach out to the team and or myself. Great opportunity for exposure for your company and great building relationships with us as investors here as well. And we'd love to find the right spot for you. And last but not least, a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day. With that, I'm your host. Let's go ahead and get started. And before we jump into today's topics, I want to make sure we introduce our two guests today who are phenomenal friends of the family, but also very keen experts in today's topics. And first and foremost, Anuj, welcome. It's a pleasure to see you and have you back here on VCTV. A little intro and a little background for everybody.
Thank you so much, mate. Good to be back. Happy Thanksgiving in advance. Hopefully you guys have a safe holiday season ahead. Introducing myself, serial entrepreneur, started 3 startups in the past. Presently working on as a founder of Yellow Sapphire Technologies and Atotum. I'm also an international partner with World Business Angel Forum, which is a G20 initiative to promote global financial inclusivity and entrepreneurship across the world. Along with it, I am working with iAngels in Israel to make some angel investments and a family fund based out of Buffalo, New York. And with Atotum, we're working in the MedTech industry, trying to bring some innovation to the sector.
I love it. And we've spoken about this topic before, and I know you've got a ton to share and updates. So we're ready to dive into that and also hear more about your work that you're doing on the global level as well. But we'll be right back on that. And before we do, Raghu, it's a pleasure as well joining us from the East Coast. It's always a pleasure to have you. If you can, a little intro and a little background for everybody.
Sure. Happy Thanksgiving soon, and pleasure to be here. Thanks to Kyle and VCTV. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've started about 7-8 businesses, had a few exits. I've been advising companies since 2012 in pretty much all verticals, but now focused on impact investing in biotech, medtech, green tech, and of course, cybersecurity. So those are kind of my core areas. Recently, I've gotten deep into a couple of medtech companies which have non or minimally invasive technology, which I like, so you can avoid surgery. So would love to discuss more about those. I think the less the invasive nature of the device or the procedure, I think the more chances of recovery. So.
Absolutely. And let's actually dive right into that. But one point, I want to talk about security today. We spoke a little bit about cybersecurity a few days ago here on VCTV, but it's something we have not really touched on a lot around these particular topics. And as we look at them, again, bio, med, health tech, and even telemedicine, security and privacy plays an enormous role. And it's something that can't go in terms of backseat. It has to be a part of the front facing conversation. So before we get in that, Raghu, continue your point. I would love to hear more about this non-invasive area that you're focused on right now, because it sounds like something we should all be paying attention to.
Sure. This is actually a very large unmet need. It's like a alternative to bariatric surgery, the gastric bypass, which is a very expensive procedure and very uncomfortable and non-reversible. So what this particular company has done is come up with a way to install an implant in the gastric valve with a sleeve that goes into the intestine. So it basically kind of screens off any kind of exchange across the intestinal wall for the first about 15% of the small intestine. So which is where a lot of the kind of gastric juice, pancreatic juices, all kinds of exchange happens there. And it kind of fakes the, brain into thinking, because it's such a thin implant, which is not really attached to anything, other than to this implant, and it's free flowing within the intestine. So what this has is a similar effect to a gastric bypass. It's used to treat obesity, type 2 diabetes, and a lot of other things as well, cosmetic weight loss, things like that. But mostly it's irreversible, takes about outpatient procedure, 10 minutes to install, similar amount to get out. So it's amazing. So, and it's now in human trials in India at one of the largest gastroenterology hospitals, and we'll soon be bringing it to the US.
So instead of, we'll call it a week-long process, so coming in, getting prepped, going through surgery, and then recovery and outpatient, instead of that estimated week process, give or take, this is something that can be done in and out in a few hours or a half a day.
And then the quality of life too. You don't need to be really on any special diet. If you get bariatric surgery or use any of those gastric balloon type of things, you are severely constrained. There's all kinds of nauseatic things and you can't eat certain things. This one is pretty much, you continue your quality of life. I mean, pretty much similar to what you were before this procedure. And it's also 1/10 of the cost of bariatric surgery, not just the financial cost, but of course, there's a lot other things when you have a surgery.
Right. Well, so this is amazing. And I wanted to start with this because we have a lot of investors here on VCTV that reach out around some of the areas that we talk about, and this is one in particular, and how to get into it and how to know when to get into it and the diligence behind it. Because something like what you're speaking about right now, it sounds amazing as a patient. As an investor, it sounds like there's a ton of holes to be poked through it, right? Are there approvals? How long of a runway is this? How much cash is the company going to need to survive? So where's my money gonna? How is my money gonna continue to survive or help the company survive, right? How do you look at a company like this from a diligence perspective to then decide to make said investment or to start building in it? Because again, that's a long runway. This is not a 12-month flip. There's a lot of that goes into this. So what's your methodology? What's your process when you were looking at this company?
I look first at the team to see if they have any shot of pulling it off, right? So this company is called Metamodics, and the principal inventor is an innovator on a device that has about 300 million annual revenue now called AngioSeal. So he's from pedigree from large MedTech companies, including St. Jude Medical, Medtronics, and so he's a proven inventor, inventor. So that is one checkbox. And already has the relationships with many of the big biotechs, the Boston Scientifics and the Medtronics of the world, and who have looked at the device already. And basically they said, finish the human trials in India and then come back to us. So the thing with the There is also a ton of data on the efficacy of this. There was a precursor there. These metamorphics is not the first to market. They had another company called Endo Barrier, which actually showed they treated through 3,500 patients and they showed the efficacy, but they had issues with safety. They were using a kind of a pin-like structure to attach to the intestinal wall, which is, as you know, intestine is not a sterile environment. So it was poking through the wall and creating toxicity and causing ulcers and stuff. So they had to withdraw the device. So, but on the efficacy side, there's a ton of data from them. So, and this particular metamorphics device does not, poke anything. It just kind of sits at the gastric wall in a natural place in an hourglass type of thing, where you just go in and then they open the hourglass on both sides with the sleeve attached. So it's a very, very ingenious mechanism, which basically builds on the previous device. So, that's, I think, so we're looking at a lot of data. It's outpatient, minimally invasive. It kind of maps into the 30-minute procedure that most gastroenterologists do. So it's not a law. It's like it doesn't need general anesthesia. So it's kind of check boxes, a lot of things. And the largest gastroenterology hospital in India, the main doctor there is also an investor who is a key opinion leader. So it checks out a lot of things. Of course, we still need the financial capital, which we are working on.
Right. No, that's a very good point, and thank you for sharing that. Again, this is a very, very big question a lot of investors have, and I'm glad we can dive into this here on VCTV. And Anuj, I want to come to you. I want to come back on the diligence question for you, but first and foremost, I mean, you're working a ton in this space. You're seeing a lot of companies. What are you generally seeing in this space that's getting you excited around, again, this area of health tech? So bio, med, telemedicine, et cetera. What are you starting to see that's getting you excited?
So, medicine is a complicated topic. It's a complicated industry. Let's be honest. It's been there since the dawn of time. Once we invented fire, since then we've always been on the lookout for herbs that can cure an injury. So it's always a very important topic. Now, let's be honest. We all here are nerds. We do like to nerd out on topics, and as engineers, as those nerds, when we are nerding out on something, we often forget that there are human elements that are involved as well, that there might be people who might not be as familiar with that technology or comfortable to switching onto it. And that approach is what has stifled tech entry into medicine over the course of last 4 and 5 years. I've seen a lot of startups come up to me and say, hey, we're working on a technology that's going to innovate the outpatient department for a hospital, that's going to help doctors create all their prescription, all their outpatient receipts online so that patient can access it anywhere in cloud. But working in the industry is where my mind gets blown, because in India, in Southeast Asia, in Africa, or even in Europe, a doctor that's sitting in the outpatient department for a hospital from 9 a.m. till probably 2 or 3 p.m. is going to go through 150 patients. That's 150 patients in 6 hours. Even more in India, you're talking somewhere around 200, 300 patients. That's a lot. And when you're going through a patient every 2 minutes, where you have to take their vitals, you have to get their symptoms, you have to take their medical history, you have to make notes, you have to make your diagnosis, you have to write a prescription, all of that, you have two choices. Either you write all of it as quickly as you can so that you can move on to the next patient, or you type it. And that writing is always going to be faster approach in this one. And that's why doctors have not yet switched on to those systems which are taking all that prescription, all that diagnostics online. But that approach this year is now significantly shifting. The companies that were earlier focusing on doctors are now focusing on the patient. They are bringing in new telemedicine companies where you can consult a doctor remotely, which is helping uh, doctors reach out to the remotest part of the world. You are seeing a approach where if radiological operations are needed, rather than setting up an entire lab in an area, there are entrepreneurs starting up remote teleradiology service where they are working on mobile labs going in from one region to another and working with radiologists online to help patient get their diagnosis as quickly as possible. That shift in focus is great. That's exactly what the industry needed. Uh, there's this approach in design thinking that when you're working on a problem, you have to think of it from both sides. You have to think of it from the business side and from the consumer side. More often than not, as entrepreneurs, as techies, we have always focused on making sure we are building great tech, not taking into account the other side. That shift is what I think is, if I may say, a landmark change in the approach, which will probably make the industry go ahead in the right direction, which would probably make it something it should have, which will turn it into something it should have been a long time ago.
And this is an interesting transition because I want to circle back around cybersecurity and privacy around data. And thank you, Anuj. This is, I mean, both of you have set such a good foundation for today's discussion, and really security. When we start to see these advancements that both of you have mentioned, and Anuj, you just mentioned, I mean, someone sees 200 to 300 patients a day, for instance, on a minimum, I'm sure, in many places around the world, but is also still looking at paper and pencil. And then also looking at digital records, then also looking at digital records being in our own hands and on our devices as well. Security plays a role, and even more so privacy of that. And so what advancements or what areas of opportunity are there around cybersecurity for the health and medical industries? Because right now it seems like kind of a black box, that there's either a ton happening, we don't know about it, or there's a ton not happening, and there is more that should be happening, especially as we get into the world we all speak about every day, is this whole digital world that we live, right? Where everything's digitized, where we now have our medical records, or we have real-time medical data from the devices that we're wearing, from tests or things that we're doing. We now have access, and we're holding on to this. So the question is to both of you, and Raghu, we'll start with you, and then Anuj will come back here in just a second, is cybersecurity or security in general. Where are the areas of opportunity? What's happening? What's not happening around health tech? And Raghu, we'll start with you.
Yeah, cybersecurity, as you know, we in our last discussion, the big challenge is, there are two issues, right? One is, how do you protect the data protection, and the second issue is privacy, right? So data protection, as you know, most of the techniques are especially appropriate to this discussion in the life sciences area, is that everything is around prevention, or after some incident has happened, reacting and then trying to plug the holes and kind of remediate. The whole idea of like the holy grail in the vaccine space, right? Which is even healthy people, if they're infected, they don't pick up the disease, right? So similar kind of thinking needs to go into cybersecurity, where system breach does not equate to a data breach. Today, that's what happens. If your system is breached, you have to report the breach as a data breach, because there's no way for you to say that your data didn't get compromised. I'm working with a company called SplitBite, which is like a data vaccine. What they do is they take the data, randomize it, and bury it into the cloud, or it could be on your local on-prem servers also. It doesn't have to be the cloud, but it can leverage the cloud infrastructure as well. So the idea here is that if somebody compromises one system, they're just going to get random data, random numbers. Second system, same thing. Unless you have a minimum number of threshold, suppose it was 3 out of 5 or 5 out of 8, whatever it is, you have to compromise that many stores to be able to actually get at the data. So you can get what is called safe harbor protection. which is very important, because mathematically you can say that, if this system is breached, there is no data breach, for things that are utilizing this technology, right? So data protection is a huge issue. This also the biggest thing that happens in cybersecurity is insider issues, right? Somebody, the insider compromise is what leads to most of the breaches. The second thing that happens is stuff like, to prevent somebody from entering your house, you put a lock, but somebody else can come and put another lock, so you cannot enter or get out. Now, that's what ransomware does. And ransomware, as you know, in the healthcare space, so many hospitals have been getting, ransomware infected, and then it's like, especially with the pandemic, things can come in from, there's no perimeter security is a lot harder to enforce, right? So a technology like this can also work, on insider threats and ransomware, because we are not, there's no single location or point of failure. You're kind of distributed. One location gets compromised, you take it out of the equation and move on. So I think that kind of distributed thinking needs to come in, as well as, look at how can you protect the data without it, having to be in, all kind of together in one place, right? Mm-hmm. So that is one. The second aspect is the privacy aspect. Privacy, again, there is a conflicting requirement. Privacy laws say that you have to kind of get rid of the data, when you don't need it, or your customer doesn't want their data to be, anymore shared, right? The other side of it is there is a requirement for retention, for like whatever, e-discovery purposes, law enforcement, litigation, all these things. So there is a conflict. If you get rid of the data, how do you, give the data if there is some kind of investigation or something is required? So you need something which can, kind of like a digital dumpster that can take the data, essentially delete it off, but for legitimate purposes, you can again retrieve it, So that is, again, SplitByte has the same technology. It goes in, whatever data has to be deleted, it just, buries it into the cloud. And then it introduces like a third party who can decide whether the purpose is legitimate to pull it back out. So you're compliant with the privacy, but at the same time, for the right purpose, with a third party in the middle who are acting like an ombudsman for privacy, you could pull it out. So the data is, safe, safely buried, and only, it's like interment, right? Only if you need it, you can pull it back, right? So these are new concepts that I think are important to kind of get into this whole area. Just like after COVID, everybody knows now about how important vaccine is as compared to, the prophylactics and therapeutics. Same idea. It's just that it's just not happened in the cybersecurity space yet.
Right. Well, and keyword is yet, and it's something that's going to have to happen. It's either going to be a forced function, it's either going to happen naturally because people are going to take to it, or it's going to be a forced function because the downside is something happens and a lot of these records get out, and it has to be a patch made fixed. Anuj, thank you, Raghu. Anuj, are you seeing anything else in this area around security and privacy, and what's being happened? Excuse me, what advancements are being had or not? As well.
So, like I said, this year is a landmark year for MedTech. I honestly cannot stress this enough on every aspect, because like we're discussing about the security aspect of data in medicine, I don't know if you know this or not, the Prime Minister of India announced that they will be creating a centralized health record registry for the entire country. Everyone will get access to a health card, which will store all of their medical data in cloud that they can access at any point in time to create that digital file that's needed for the people. The same for Delhi as well. New Delhi government announced that they will be creating that system for every Delhi resident as well. And you're basically talking about creating a system where you have 1.3 billion people that have their medical records, that have all their medical files on cloud. That's That's an unprecedented level of data. That's Facebook level of data. And we all know how much Facebook is valued right now. So yeah, that data is pretty important. And it's equally important to make sure that once that system is being created, that it's protected as well. There are a ton of medtech companies right now. They are working across Europe, across US, across Southeast Asia. And one thing which is common that I have observed in all of them is that while they all have a digital health vault, while they are all storing all that medical data, they are still not sure of what to do with it. I remember I was talking to the founder of this online medical pharmacy in India, biggest medical pharmacy right now, almost $1 billion company. And they were talking to me that we have a ton of data. We have every health record that or every blood test that's being booked through our platform, we get record of that. So we have a lot of files right now. We have a lot of OCR records, blood works. What we don't know is what to do with it. This medical records, while it's very important, also have its expiration date. So
Yes.
unlike your personal data, where if you are, let's say, browsing something off of Amazon, you're browsing something off of Facebook, it has its life, but it can still be used up for a longer duration. If you are buying something on a regular basis, it basically creates a virtual personality for you. On the contrary, when you're getting a blood work done, while it may create a short-term picture for you, but post 3 months, post 6 months, no doctor's going to look at it, and it's practically of no use. Until and unless, of course, someone's researching on that condition, in which case it's a needle in a haystack for them. So there's that fine line. You want to store that and you want to secure that data, but at the same time, you can't you can't go around it. You can't access it and use it in a way that you would do for all the other kind of information that you collect from a user.
Right.
So that fine line, in my opinion, needs to be maintained.
Right, and that's a great point. I mean, data does have an expiration date. It's valuable only to a certain point, and specifically around health. And as we have real-time data, that'll be interesting to see how that changes as well, because we're wearing more devices, we're starting to be more connected, as we've spoken about again here on VCTV, and what that does and how that affects us is going to be interesting. But to both of you now, let's take a different look at things. Where do we go from here? So we continually talk about how 2020 was this huge foundational transformation year for technology and industries throughout, right? It was the digitization of so much that we can't even fully express in the time that we have today on VCTV. But nonetheless, it's a pivotal year for the next decade. So for both of you, where are the opportunities? Looking ahead in the next 10 years, where should we be focusing, both as investors and entrepreneurs? Where are those opportunities? Where are those gaps that need to be filled if we're looking to, again, invest and or build in this space? And Anuj, let's start with you. Where are you seeing the areas of opportunity globally or locally as you have such wide efforts going on right now?
So talking about the areas of opportunity, some of the key areas, although we do talk a lot about personalization, that factor when it goes into medicine goes in a completely different fashion. A lot of companies have spoken about personalized medicine. Now, while I think that's a great area of opportunity, I would say that remains a very small niche in my opinion. Personalized medicine will be an important factor in the coming years, in the coming decade, but that's only going to be for very severe diseases like cancer or some autoimmune condition. For every other condition, there's going to be personalized care, which is getting me excited. When you're going through a procedure, every user likes to be treated the way they think it's right for them. So if I'm going for a medical procedure where, even though it may be minimally invasive, it may be scary for me. On the contrary, another user would be fine just going under the knife for a more severe process as well. So comforting the user, taking the onus of care away from them are two key components which I'm seeing here right now. As of this moment, as of 2020, the onus of care, be it for getting a diagnosis, for finding the right doctor and deciding upon the procedure, handling the finances, handling your insurance, handling your post-op care, it's always, always, always on the user. So any company that can take the onus of care away from that user onto themselves is where I think something innovative is going to be. Some great services can be made out of this.
I love it. Raghu, I see you shaking your head as well, and you're ready. Same question, continue on.
Yeah, I mean, I think precision medicine personalized is very important because, as you know, the data, I mean, again, comes back to data. We have so much data. There is data that is created, which is never looked at again, right? And so there are two sides to it. One is that the data is not accessible to the right people for advancing the medicine, for instance, like failed clinical trials. The company will just keep it inside, so it's not available to others to innovate, using that data, right? So there is data that is, the lack of access is one aspect of it. Of course, because of privacy reasons, you can still make it accessible as long as you remove personally identifying information, right? So that is one side. Of the other side is there's so much data out there that people don't know what to do with it. I mean, every one of us is creating uh, as much data now as like what used to be the whole world had like maybe about 30 years ago. Each of us is creating that much now. So there's all kinds of data, right? There is all these log files. There is so many things which is useless to most people. Some of them are very, very temporal, very temporary. Others could be useful for. So the whole idea is how do we take this data and get the essence of, extract the information that can be useful, and then get rid of the rest of it, right? So that you have to be able to process the data, especially if you can do it at the edge, instead of pulling it all into the central place or whatever. It becomes very complicated. So at the edge, if you can actually extract the essence, privatize it in the sense of removing personal information, and make it available for whatever the innovation and processing that's needed. So those kind of, I think, technologies have a huge opportunity. Focus on wellness, longevity, because it doesn't help to live long, but if your quality of life is not good, so you need to be healthy and live long, right? So
right.
How do you do that? So that, I think, the wellness aspect, finding the right right way to maintain your health, right, as opposed to most of the current pharma industry is about reactive stuff, right? After somebody, and they have an incentive to keep, like, make it chronic so that they can sell more. So how can you incentivize the wellness side, where preventive and as well as preventive, and also the vaccine type of thing, right? Which uh, doesn't even let you get infected, in other words. So I think the data areas, as well as the areas, the regulatory part also, there is the insurance and the regulatory side, which creates a huge burden on the industry. I mean, I'm not saying it's not needed, but it's just very inefficient right now.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to find ways to do it better while having the right checks and balances. But it shouldn't be kind of the 70-80% of the cost. So that's a problem. So I think those are areas where we need to really look at very carefully, because we have the technology, AI, and so many new technologies are available. Just there is an inbuilt incentive to do it the way that it benefits certain vested interests, unfortunately.
Right. Well, yeah, and Anuj, I see you smiling and shaking your head as well. So go ahead and add on if you have anything.
I think Raghu just said the best phrase, the holy grail for the medical industry. Proactive care is better than reactive care. It doesn't get any better than that. If you can nip a condition in the bud, if a user is coming up with a problem and you can identify it, address it before it becomes a major issue, that's the best service you need, right? That's the best care you need. A live case example for that would be my own mother. Just last month, early in October, 6th of October, she woke me up at 8 a.m. and she was having a stroke. And at 8 a.m., I did not have a neurologist on call where I could take her to. So I rushed her to the nearest hospital, went into the ER, and I was told that, all right, here's the thing. She is having something neurological. We can't say for sure it's a stroke. It may be something else as well. And I can send her for testing, but I don't have a neurologist right now. So for me, my platform became my lifesaver, and that's why I'm all in on a Totem right now, because the first thing I did was pull up a neurologist from my own platform because we had all that stuff on standby for my mother.
Right.
I was able to get a neurologist, called him up, told her the symptoms, and he immediately told me, all right, she is definitely having a stroke. Get to my hospital. I'm not in the hospital right now, but my team's there. I'll have them ready on standby.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what I did. I just went into that hospital, had their team look at it, took her. They immediately took her to an MRI because they were always ready there. They were just waiting on the machine to for her to arrive. And for stroke, TPA needs to be given within 2 hours, with the maximum window being 4 hours, and every minute counts. I was able to do all of that within 2 hours, 15 minutes. Imagine someone who does not have access to all of this system. Imagine
Right.
Still in a country of 1.3 billion people, there are users who will go to a hospital who would not know what to do because a neurologist is not available, who will arrive within probably the next 3 or 4 hours, and by that time that window is already gone. So after all was said and done, after she was given TPA, she was allowed to go back home a couple of days later. I had a word with the neurologist, and he said, we got lucky there because there is no permanent damage. So the chance of having another stroke is really low. But for anyone who comes in after 4 hours, they are going to have a stroke again. They are going to face that situation again. And the next one is going to be the one that happened before.
Mm-hmm.
So that key factor of preventative care, even in an emergency situation, having it addressed right away is the key. Is probably the ultimate truth. I cannot say it any better than that.
And Anuj, so happy your mother's okay, but it brings up a very good point as well. It's just that access, that need, and so much more. But again, just happy your mother's okay, even though it's a good example. But again, just happy family's okay. With that being said, gentlemen, we are coming close to the top of the hour, so I want to make sure each of you get some time in for closing thoughts on today's topic and where things that continue from here, and anything else you want to get in. And Raghu, let's go ahead and start with you. Closing thoughts around today's topic of, again, health tech is a big bubble. So bio, med, general healthcare, and then telemedicine. Anything else you'd like to add on as closing thoughts? And then, of course, where can everyone find you to continue the conversation online?
Sure. I can be reached on LinkedIn at my last name, Rao, Raghu, the first name, and middle initial S, Rao Raghu S. I think if you especially go broad across the biotech, HealthTech, MedTech, and telemedicine, I think we are at the start of this decade, which is going to transform things dramatically because we have the technologies. And I think the pandemic has actually made us realize how inadequate the existing infrastructure and systems are. So I think there is more openness now for technology to come in and really transform this area, which is very close to all of us. As Anuj was talking about, we are talking about family and our very loved ones, and so it's going to change. A huge transformation is happening, which has been accelerated and actually made more acceptable because of the pandemic, where people kind of realize how much can be done still. I mean, just this pandemic with all these so much investment that's gone in, it still took us for a year. It just had the entire world on its knees. So it's not like we are talking so many advancements are happening, but on this infectious diseases, nobody really had now we let's see, hopefully the vaccine is going to create enough whatever it is, herd immunity, so it doesn't become an issue, right? So I think the technologies are very, very important in terms of being used in the right spaces and advancing the more difficult problems, right? So I think it's going to be exciting journey in the next 10 years. And some of the areas I'm looking at closely are burns. There are graphs, like for instance, plastics, as you know, have been overused, and it's creating the waste. But there are all these biodegradable, or graphs, things like that, which that does not require like a plastic kind of material, which kind of merge into the all these implants area, where it's not necessarily something that needs to be taken out, or creates more waste, things that are biomaterials type of. So there is a biomaterials company I'm looking into, which uses again things that are normally a waste, like placental material, which can be used. It's like a stem cell that can be used to graft, burns and things like that, skin grafts. So I think those are the kind of technologies we need, which does not create additional waste, and in fact reduces ongoing waste, right? So I think there's a lot more. What we know is like so little compared to what we don't know. And first of all, we have to understand that we don't know what we don't know, right? So
it's very, very, very true. And thank you, Raghu. Anuj, to you, closing thoughts, and of course, where can everyone find you online?
So, sharing my closing thoughts, like Raghu said, there's still a lot we don't know. So, this is the year where that factor, or that humility is setting in among every industry. Uh, for my closing thoughts, I mean, there's one thing I would share, that the pandemic has been a time machine. It has taken us from 2019, and it has dropped us somewhere in the future where things have changed so quickly, and we are all into such a different world that we would not have imagined. In just edtech, I personally could not have imagined government-run institution, government schools using online classes to reach out to students. But that all happened within a matter of months, if not weeks. And that same goes for MedTech as well. It's brought in a fundamental shift in people's mindset. Uh, we have gone from a phase where we were not compassionate enough, if I may say so, towards people with chronic illness. Type 1 diabetes, for example, it's a huge it's a huge problem right now. 1 in 10 people around the world has type 1 diabetes right now. And for those people who are going through an autoimmune condition, who cannot survive without their daily dose of insulin, it's really difficult to manage that. The fundamental shift of compassion towards those people, and understanding that those people are at a huge risk and need something that has to address those problems as quickly as possible. Uh, Going through multiple injections every day is painful. So any company that can develop a system that helps every type 1 diabetic, that's the solution. That's a winner, in my opinion. You have a huge market right there for you. Uh, any company that works on a system that can help asthmatic patients, because we are again living in a very polluted environment. Delhi, for example, is going through its pollution season, where the air is practically unbreathable. So any company that can work on a solution that can avoid asthmatic patients having those triggers. Mental health. There's this recent study that came out that 1 in 5 patients who recovered from COVID have developed some sort of a mental illness, be it depression, be it anxiety, be it PTSD. Any company that's working along those lines is of course is of course a winner for me. And shameless plug here. Any company that's working on helping out patients with chronic conditions in an emergency situation is a winner, because anyone who has epileptic seizures, on any neurological condition, any cardiological condition, any chronic condition, type 1 diabetes, any blood pressure related or hypertension related issues, all of that is a winner for me. And that's what we are doing at Atom. Because for these people, it's not a matter of if I'm ever going to be in an emergency situation where I would have to rush to an ER. It's a matter of when that's going to happen. So anyone with high blood pressure, they are always on the lookout, making sure that they are getting their tests done, because they are at high risk for getting their arteries blocked and having a heart attack because of it. Any type 1 diabetic or any type 2 diabetic is always at a high risk for a hypoglycemic incident where their blood sugar level might drop all of a sudden. So for them, when that happens, you have to be ready. And if they're not around family, if they're not around people who understand that, you have to have a company that can understand that, that can address all of that. So that, for me, is a winner. Pandemic has brought in humility. It's brought in a fundamental shift in our thinking. We now realize, or at least from the people I'm observing, we realize that life is precious. Our parents are turning 60. So for me, a 30-year-old guy seeing my parents get old, it's a very easy feeling. We've gone are the days for me where I could say I would live forever. But that fragileness of life is what's changed in the world, and hopefully it's going to stay longer. Everyone's going to take care of each other. Everyone's going to compassionate to each other. We could use a lovely world, and let's be honest, it's been a horrible year. So holiday season is around. Let's hope Christmas Santa brings us a great 2021. Can't wait for all of this to end.
Absolutely. And Anuj and Raghu, thank you both so much, not just for your insights today of what's happening in these industries, but to your compassionate statements as well as to where we go from here over the next decade. And excited to be working with both of you here on VCTV to share with our audience today around this. And audience, you heard it here first. I mean, as an investor, both Anuj and Raghu painted a picture of where you should be looking at and how to be looking at companies in this space, and are both experts if you would like to reach out. And startups and entrepreneurs, again, the blueprint's been painted. There's plenty of opportunities, plenty of ways to begin. And honestly, this area is just getting started. So you're not late, you're not early, you're right on time. So definitely jump in. And with that being said, again, thank you, audience, for tuning in. If you like what you heard, click subscribe, give us a thumbs up. Do reach out if you'd like to be on a show like today to join Anuj and Raghu in sharing your thoughts and insights on different technologies, industries, and regions around the world. And entrepreneurs, if you'd like the chance to pitch us as investors and founders your company, product, or service, get real-time feedback on where your product is headed, and also the industry that you're building in, along with building foundational relationships with each and every one of us and exposure to our entire live audience, do reach out to the team and or myself. We'd love to find the right spot for you. And a big thank you to the LATOKEN team and to Maria for making VCTV possible every single day, all day, anywhere in the world. And again, Raghu, Anuj, thank you both very much. Happy holidays, and we'll see you both very soon. I'm your host, Kyle Ellicott. You can find myself along with Anuj and Raghu online 24/7, 365 at Kyle Ellicott for myself. And we'll talk to you soon. I'm back here shortly.